Racism isn't going to protect first responders. Racism isn't going to keep people safe and save lives. What it's doing is making people more unsafe. What the president says still has tremendous force and meaning. And so when he speaks hatefully and foments racism and peddles scapegoating conspiracy theories against Americans who look like me, he's putting people at risk.
Why is this a global competition to you if everyday Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay?
I was obviously pretty angry about it, but not surprised, because this isn't the first time he's scapegoated Asian Pacific Americans, in particular Chinese Americans. President Trump has called it the China or Chinese virus.
I talk about the Chinese virus, and I mean it.
Secretary Pompeo has insisted in the United Nations that the coronavirus be called the Wuhan virus.
The Wuhan virus.
It's very damaging, hurtful, and it puts people at risk, and it makes them unsafe. And I want to hand it to Wei Jiang for standing up to the president after he said, "Go ask China." And she spoke up and said,
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you,
I'm not.
And she didn't let it go. And I want to commend her for her courage standing up to the president of the United States. This is not new to us. People often say to me, I can't believe that our country is capable of putting people at our southern border in cages and in camps on American soil, and that we separate children from their families. And what I say is, I can believe it, because we've done it before. We put 125,000 Japanese Americans in camps on American soil. We separated families, separated children from their families. And so this is an unfortunate legacy of hate and racism that the president is now fomenting. This current round of scapegoating reminds us of, the Wen Ho Lee episode and fears about Chinese espionage. And then before that, fears about China's new economic power, and scapegoating Chinese Americans for that, or saying that we were somehow a threat. This goes back to the Chinese Exclusion Act and, of course, Japanese internment. He gives license to people to act out on their hate and their hateful instincts. And, of course, for Asian Pacific Americans, in particular Chinese Americans, the case of Vincent Chin from the 80s haunts us all the time, because some auto workers thought that Mr. Chin was Japanese and was stealing their jobs, and they beat him to death with a baseball bat. So these aren't the only instances of violence against Asian Pacific Americans. We're seeing an uptick in bias, discrimination, and hate crimes across the country, frankly, since this president was elected. And he's just now pouring gasoline on a fire of hate that he started and has brewed. I'm extraordinarily grateful that I get to do the best job anyone, and frankly, any lawyer can ask for, and that's being a state attorney general. It is a privilege that too few people who look like me, Asian Pacific Americans, have had the honor of doing. And it is something that, after this legacy of Japanese internment and the Chinese Exclusion Act, and amidst all of this, it's a tremendous honor to have a role like this where we don't have to stay silent. And I can speak up for Asian Pacific Americans and take a stand. And we don't have to suffer discrimination and hatred and violence. And I can be there for people.